You're listening to Speaking Of by WFSU Public Media. Hurricane season is descending upon us once again, and with it can come 70 miles per hour winds or higher, flash flooding, power outages, and severe damage of all types. That is why it is extremely important to be ready and vigilant. Regan McCarthy is sitting down with Leon County Public Information Officer Mathieu Cavell and the Emergency Management Director for Leon County, Kevin Peters, to discuss how you can be best prepared this season.
Hi, I'm Regan McCarthy, the Interim News Director here at WFSU, and I'm filling in today for Gina Jordan on this episode of Speaking Of. Today, we're speaking of hurricanes. Hurricane season officially starts June 1st. Last year, Florida took hits from 3 hurricanes, Debbie, Helene, and Milton, causing tens of billions of dollars in damage. And now this year, forecasters are calling for a busier than normal season, thanks in part to some warmer waters off the coast. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, is predicting 13 to 19 named storms. As many as 6 to 10 of those could become hurricanes, and officials expect 3 to 5 to reach major hurricane status. Meanwhile, changes are potentially underway at the federal level. The Trump administration has tasked a review council with looking into how the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, responds to storms. Some worry that those changes could lead to reduced funding or manpower that could mean reduced support from the federal government for local recovery efforts. With all of that combined, many Floridians are understandably feeling a bit anxious. I turned to Leon County Director of Community Relations and Resilience, Matt Cavell, and County Division of Emergency Management Director Kevin Peters to get some answers about what to expect and how to prepare for this year's potential storms. Thanks, both of you, for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So hurricane season is almost upon us, and I feel like we're already hearing a lot about the warm waters in the Gulf. What should we be thinking about as hurricane season is coming here?
Yeah, so, I think if I told you, it could be as many as 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes, you would think that's really busy probably, right? But that's simply just what an average season could bring to the Atlantic Basin from Maine to Texas.
Wow.
That's what an average hurricane season is.
Wow.
Now we're talking about a hurricane season in 2025 that might be slightly above normal. We may see 13 to 19 named storms this hurricane season. I think the key that we need to keep in mind is one, at this point we don't know when or where, so we always have to be on watch as we go through the next 6 months of hurricane season, because it just takes one to hit a community to make a problem. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is don't anchor to what your experience was last year. We need to take every new storm serious and what hazards it may bring. You may have thought last year a storm was coming right for you, and it changed at the last minute. You might have this sense like, oh yeah, we got through that one. We can't assume that. You always have to assume that every new storm that comes this hurricane season is going to be worse than what you experienced last time, and you've got to be ready for it.
So as we talk about hurricane preparedness, hurricane season starting, I think there's 2 times that people are preparing for storms. One is now at the beginning of hurricane season, and one is once that storm forms and we start to say, hey, that's coming toward the coast, coming toward us. What kind of preparation should people be doing now?
So at this point in time, now, before hurricane season really kicks off, folks should be examining their insurance policies and understanding what coverage they have, what coverage they don't, and making the correct personal family plans to accommodate that insurance plan. Again, if you have any questions, the state also has resources at the Department of Financial Services, which you can find out more about on our website at the county, which is leonready.com. We would encourage folks now with that advance notice to be able to consider and make changes to or accommodations to their insurance plan. Because once you're in a 5-day error cone of a hurricane, it is far too late to make those considerations and to make those appropriate planning decisions. As you enter into a 5-day error cone, that's when you need to make those decisions to make sure that your bucket has all the things in it that you need. We always encourage folks at the county to have a disaster preparedness bucket in which things from medications to important documents to food and potable water and all the other good things that are on our list on leonready.com that you would have available for you and your family. Each member of your family should have a prepared bucket.
Last year, as we had potentially a major hurricane coming right toward Tallahassee, I think a lot of people had questions about how to decide whether they should evacuate. I know the guidance for people in mobile homes and low-lying areas was to evacuate. Other people sort of had to make those decisions in their own homes. Matt or Kevin, do either of you have guidance on how a person decides when or whether they should evacuate their homes for a storm?
When folks would choose to evacuate a home should be a decision that they have made for and planned in advance about where they would go should a storm be severe enough again to threaten their property or enact their plans. As we have done at the county, we have issued for all past hurricanes mandatory evacuations of manufactured and mobile homes. They are not safe structures during any category of a hurricane, and they're not safe structures during tornadoes. So when people make the decisions about an evacuation, they also should do so well in advance. They should not be evacuating hours before a storm. They should be evacuating 24 or greater hours. So they should days ahead of the storm's arrival. And they should not flee far from the storm because they can stay nearby so that they can return to their property most easily when the storm has passed.
Right. And so I know I've heard the governor talk about that idea that we don't need to all leave Florida because a hurricane is coming. We just maybe some people very close to the coast need to come more inland. Tallahassee is already fairly inland. So it seems to me like, for a lot of people, is there a great need to evacuate?
The greatest hazard that we want people to avoid during tropical weather is the storm surge flooding along the coastlines. So certainly a lot of emphasis from the governor and the State Emergency Management Agency will be encouraging residents in those coastal storm surge zones to evacuate inland tens of 20s of miles to be somewhere safer. When you come into Leon County and Inland County, as Matt said, obviously the wind vulnerable structures like mobile homes, RVs, kind of temporary structures like that, definitely need to have a place safer to go. But by and large, standard traditional site-built homes tend to have good survivability in tropical systems. The hazard that really causes the most problem is tree limbs that may break and fall onto the top of the house. That tends to be what we see as one of the bigger problems in the inland communities is the trees that actually get blown down, not so much the houses being blown away by the hurricane winds when you get inland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that brings me to the question I was going to ask you, Kevin. I know I've heard you talk about, we were talking about preparedness. You've talked about how sometimes preparedness can happen a little bit at a time, year after year. And I know you've said you've done that on your own property when it comes to tree safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's expensive. I mean, that's, there's no doubt about that. Everything in life's expensive. And there's never been a point that I've been an adult that it's a good time now. So, and we understand that. And we're just like everybody else in the community. We have to prepare our own homes and our own families. And it can be expensive if you try to do everything at once. Certainly it could be a hefty investment. And that's all part of that planning process that we've talked about, identifying the things that you can do now, particularly the life safety things, the building the bucket, talking to your insurance agent, things like that. But having that plan that works years to multi-years to making your home safe is, our homes are one of the most valuable investments any of us have. So certainly just as we do things to update it throughout the years, including safety measures should be part of that home improvement planning that we all do. And again, the personal story, it's taken me a number of years, but I've had some trees that are a hazard to my home. They've gotten sick or some have died. And, every few years, investing in tree company to come out and take care of those is, we've been very lucky. We've not had any issues with trees over the last few storms. But it has taken us a few years and we understand that and just don't give up. Everybody's got to make a plan and stick with it over time.
And so we've been talking a lot here about the wind and the trees because right here where we are in Tallahassee, that's a big focus. I don't want to minimize that water impact at all. Obviously, we do have a lot of listeners in our coastal areas. So just want to touch base with you again, Kevin, about that water impact, which I think is really the greatest risk for people in those coastal areas.
Yeah, absolutely. If we go back to if we go back to Hurricane Michael and we look at some of the stats from that, some of the reports that there were, I think in Florida. Now these are Florida specific numbers. There were more out of the state, but 42 I think was the number. It may have been 45 fatalities during the storm. 7 of those the National Weather Service determined to be directly related to the storm itself. And of those 7, 5 were individuals that were in storm surge zones along the coast that were lost their lives due to the rising waters. Again, Hurricane Ian in 2022, over 100 individuals lost their lives to rising water storm surge. If you look at the stats collected by the National Hurricane Center over the last 30 years, storm surge deaths outrank any other deaths due to tropical weather causes. When you add on lost lives to flooding, it's over 55% of the loss of life is water related. Wind loss of life, again, any loss is too much. Percentage-wise, 7%. So just the statistics there say how dangerous water is. So if you're a listener and you live in one of the coastal counties, you need to know which evacuation zone you live in, first off, understand that risk, and then pay very close attention to the orders that are given by your local emergency management agency. All that's going to be based on storm surge height, but it's broken down by evacuation zone level. So A would be at the coast, B, C, D. As you get inland, that letter gets, I guess, higher. But again, paying close attention to the orders that come from your local emergency management agency and knowing just which zone you live in so you can go when they tell that zone to go.
Good to know. Another thing I've been hearing from listeners is a lot of concern about support from the federal government, whether there could be a lack of support in the upcoming storm season from organizations like FEMA that we typically count on. How are you looking at that as a local government, Matt?
Volatility and uncertainty ahead of a hurricane season and during a hurricane season is part and parcel of what emergency management does. So if we do have some uncertainty about what programs may be available or not, the planning and the execution at the local level to support our folks and keep them safe here in Leon County doesn't change. So that remains consistent and unchanged as it has for all the years in which we responded to disaster. Now, all of that being said, the federal government has been issuing major disaster declarations for affected communities from other disasters, even just as recently as last week, to provide individual assistance to households and to also provide that public assistance to responding governments. So we've seen a practice up until now to continue to provide that disaster assistance and support to the individuals and to the government. We would always encourage our federal partners to continue to do such. They are an important part of disaster recovery for our community. They have continued to exhibit the commitment to do that, and we hope that that continues through hurricane season. But I'll turn it over to Kevin for any more.
Everything Matt said, and there is a review committee that's looking into recommendations. We did hear that one of the possibly the ultimate goals is to change FEMA from being called FEMA to another agency name. So, but again, they are still looking at ways to provide, as Matt said, that service to the community, to our country following disasters. So, obviously a stay tuned moment, but again, they are looking at ways to continue to provide a service.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like if that service that FEMA provides changes, do you locally here have plans B and C in your minds?
Oh, no, we have plans D, E, F, and G. So, no, we have many different plans about how to be able to respond under any circumstances if anything changes at the federal and the state level. Again, we don't anticipate such changes at this time, but our response will absolutely not change to ensure that shelters are open, that points of distribution have critical commodities such as water and MREs and tarps, that we're still going to commit to sandbags and that we're still going to do the damage assessments on every property to make sure that we communicate the level of the damage of the disaster to our state and federal partners to seek as much aid as possible in any possible way from all sources for our community, the same way we have done through those past 11 federally declared disasters and, God forbid, again this upcoming season.
I think similar anxieties are also arising about NOAA. Even here in Tallahassee, a few months ago, maybe, when a set of tornadoes were coming in our direction, our local NOAA weather radio went out. And I think that as people are feeling a little bit anxious about the approaching storm season, feeling a little bit anxious about these changes that we might be seeing federally, I think they're wondering what could happen if we can't count on NOAA.
Well, in talking with our local National Weather Service office, they are staffed. They haven't had any major loss of staffing outside of what their normal vacancy rate is right now, and it was just these are very good scientists. They do a very good job, and they have very good tools. They are committed to giving us the best forecasts. The scientists at the National Hurricane Center are some of the best hurricane forecasters in the world, and very similar. They are going to use all the tools at their disposal to continue to provide very good forecasts. I know that we've had some severe weather outbreaks just this spring. The forecasts have been provided, all of the outlooks, and we've not seen From our perspective, we've not seen a degradation in the services our local office provides. They are still doing all of the things that they've always done, and we anticipate that to continue all through all of hurricane season.
And I do want to return to the point that you had brought up, Regan, which was that there was a NOAA weather radio alert failure. I also want to acknowledge and thank NOAA and National Weather Service for being transparent about that and for coming forward and saying, please get your information on weather alerts from all other available sources. That level of transparency is very important, and it allowed us at Leon County to be able to, again, re-inform folks, to be able to tell them to get your weather alerts again from local sources, from web services, from mobile apps, to all the other things in which you may receive your alerts, to continue to receive them in multiple different ways. So again, acknowledgement to, yes, the NOAA weather radio had failed. National Weather Service was very transparent about that and worked with partners to ensure that everyone had every possible way to receive alerts going forward in the season. But again, it just goes back to that core message, which we say all the time, is no one has been communicated with too much during a disaster, either from programs like this or from our local partners that we work with. There's nothing is too much when it comes to disaster. So again, we appreciate all the folks that make that happen.
Right. And I think that goes back to the messaging that I've heard a lot, which is that during an emergency or as any kind of weather approaches, a person should have more than one way to get alerts.
Yes, you should have every possible way in which you can get alerts, and you should encourage your friends, family, neighbors, and others to also have the same way in which reaching folks. So, for instance, a radio service may go down, a weather app might not work as intended, or you may not have consistent access to electricity, so you should know which radio station to tune into. There are a lot of different ways that disaster will challenge you and the way in which you receive alerts, and you need to be ready to tune into all of them as often as possible to keep yourself informed.
Mm-hmm. I think what some of these last questions I've been asking you really highlight is a general sense of anxiety and maybe loss of trust in some of these big government groups that we count on. Maybe a loss of trust in FEMA or NOAA or even local government. What can you be doing to address that?
So the biggest thing I'll say before I turn it over to Kevin is at the local level, we live here. We live on the roads that we clear trees from. We go to the parks and the community events, which all of these folks in our community also go to. We are absolutely committed at every level to serve our community, to return us to normal as quick as possible, and to ensure, again, as the strongest advocate possible, to get every state and federal resource available for folks here. Again, as we've stressed, the our federal partners at the federal level and the state level have been professional. They've been well educated for all these years. They've been committed to service. And right now, we don't have indications that anything would be different than that. So we're going to lean into that when it comes to the community that we live in and we serve to ensure that everyone gets everything that they possibly need and deserve to recover. But Kevin, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, just to reemphasize, Matt's point, this is our community. We live here, and we're part of the professional network that helps keep people safe, and we're going to always do the most professional level work we can to advocate for our community.
Mm-hmm. My last question that I have for you is that I'm hearing from people who are saying, I'm not ready for a hurricane season. I'm still recovering. Maybe I'm still recovering here in Tallahassee from those tornadoes that came about a year ago and knocked a big hole in my roof. Or, maybe some people are still recovering from even Hurricane Michael 7 years ago. What resources, what help is out there for people who feel like they're still in this recovery mode? They're not ready to prepare for another storm season.
So the first thing that we would say to them is, we hear you. So we also understand that both from our lived experience here in the community and also from our response, which again spools up weeks prior to a storm and continues weeks after a storm, often months. We see that. And we understand that there is a level of anxiety and, to be honest with you, trauma that folks have had to experience from the past storm, which brought to some of your listeners from Helene and Debbie and the May 10th tornadoes significant emotional and financial burdens. We would always encourage folks to call 211 Big Bend in this region. They can help with those wraparound services, social services that can address some of that anxiety, the mental anguish. They can also provide connections to financial services, to social services that can provide material resources or direction or guidance. But again, they are expert counselors and listeners and case managers. And that would be, at least from our side in the communications element, the biggest thing we can stress for folks is we hear you. There are people here that are willing to help, and that we're going to continue to serve this community.
There's a lot of information out there. Just encourage people to take a little time and kind of look into it. Call 211 if you feel like that's a need you have, and you don't be afraid to start preparing. That's we can be afraid of the weather a little bit and pensive about what may be coming, but we can't be afraid to prepare. We've all got to get into this together.
Well, Kevin Peters, Matt Cavell, thanks so much for being here. And I mean this with the greatest respect when I say this, but I hope I won't have to talk to you guys too much in the next few months here.
Well, we agree.
Thanks, y'all.